Hello and welcome to our tutorial. So in this tutorial here we're going to look at a puzzle in VIOR. So we'll just look at the kind of finished product. Now maybe a puzzle is the wrong description for this, but it's a keypad. So we have to know the right input. So we have our reticule responding to going over our buttons, and if I click on a button I can get an input. You can see in the bottom left hand corner there it's saying hit, and if I get 4 in a row wrong, so it's a 4 code combination, it says incorrect, and then in the bottom left hand corner in a debug, and it resets, and the combination at the moment is 1 3 3 1, and if you can see in the debug it says correct. So so we're going to have a look at how we make that. So this is using, you could use objects. We did this in class where we use actual cubes and we give them colliders, and it works the same way. We're just going to use a UI canvas with some UI buttons on it. In this example here, it works pretty much the same way. So let's have a look at our construction. So we've made a UI canvas. We've changed it from being the generic overlay to being world space. We've scaled it down to 0.03, and it's got its I think it's the original width and height to it. Inside of that we have created a button. So this is kind of a generic Unity button, as you can see from its design. So it's got its button script on it, and we have just left pretty much the only thing we've changed is the highlight color from the default sort of setup. And then we have in our textures here, we have we've no textures on these buttons. We're just using text, the actual generic text that comes with each button. So this literally has the number 1 written on it, number 2, etc. Now each of the buttons is named 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. So and we're going to use the fact that we're going to use their actual name, the string that is their name. So if this was called button 1, what we are trying to do here won't work. So we're just displaying a string up here. So this isn't a number. So if this is 1331, it's not 1331. It might as well be A, B, C, D. So it's an alphanumeric input. And then we're just comparing, is our alphanumeric input similar to the code or to the prearranged alphanumeric input or alphanumeric code? And if it is, then we're successful, then we're correct. So let's have a look at how. So this is just a standard canvas with 9 standard buttons. And then each button has a script on it called a puzzle button. And then we have our trigger events on the buttons. So let's have a look at that script first. Puzzle button, that's it there. So it's not a terribly complicated script at all. So we've got a public bool, and it's looking at. Now the only reason we make it public is so we can see it in the inspector, so you can see it turning on and off as a sort of a fast forward to kind of debugging it, and it's initially set to false. And then we've made custom sort of commands or custom functions, and this is so it's public void. It must be public because we're going to use this in our event trigger in Unity. So we've got looking and not looking, and basically when we're looking at the button, when like the reticule is over the button, we're setting looking at to be true. And when we're not looking at it, when we look away, it's set to be false. So quite straightforward. And if we look at that in Unity here, so pointer enter, so when the pointer enters the bounds of this button, we're running looking. And on pointer exit, we're running not looking. And that literally flicks the Boolean from being true to being false. And then down here we say, if get button down fire 1, so when I press the fire button and looking at is true. So this is straightforward enough. So this will only work when we're actually looking at the button. So this part of the input here is kind of interesting in the sense that this is kind of generic PC or Mac terminology for input. So you'd normally use that with a keyboard or a mouse. But the input we're going to use, if you remember from previous tutorial, so if I go to my what am I looking for here? Is it project settings? Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So we have set up our input. We have two Y inputs, and one of them is based on the movement of the mouse, and the other is based on the joystick. So we're sort of anticipating having a Bluetooth joystick so that we can move through and navigate through our 3D space in our kind of VR environment. So in this example here, we're using mouse look to look around because we've got a rigid body controller. Now we've got gravity turned off, and these should all be set to zeros so we can't actually move anywhere. But regardless of that, so we're not going anywhere with this FPS controller, we're just looking around with it. But we're going to be using a Bluetooth controller to get that in that fire input. So that's where that input's going to come from. So we'll press the fire button on a Bluetooth controller. So when looking at is true, when I'm looking at the button and I press fire on my Bluetooth controller, then I've just got a debug here to say I've actually hit something, I've pressed the button. And then I've got these two variables here that I want to change. Now they're both references to a different script, so they're public static variables. One of them's called code length and one of them's called input code, and they're both on this script here. So before I jump over to that script, so what we're doing here is we're increasing the length of the string. So if I click on one button, I'll have input one number. When I click on the second button, I'll have a second number. So I have two alphanumeric inputs. 3, 4, etc. And then in the other script, when we get to 4, we reset it. But also we want the actual, like, what numbers are going to be displayed. And the number that's displayed is the name of the game object. So let's just look at how that's implemented. So each one of these scripts or like each one of these objects, these buttons, has this script on it. So each individual button has this script. So the script is used 9 times. And every time I click on something, I'm adding its game object, or its name. So the name of the button that I click over. So if I click over button 6, I'll be adding its name, which is 6. So the display here will get the number 6 written on it because that's its name. If I change its name to Frank, and then we press play, and we go over here and we click on 5, and then we click on 6, we've got Frank. So we're literally inputting the name of the button, and we should definitely not make that Frank. So that should be back to 6. So that's what this piece of code is doing here. It's adding the name of the object that this code is on. And then they're referencing this here. So before we run through the script, let's just look at where that is. So I've made a level controller, and I've added this script to the level controller. This is just an empty. It actually should be at 0, 0, 0. That's just for convenience. It's not its position's irrelevant. But so it's just an empty with a script on it. And you can see here I've got a text field, and that's this text field here from the display. So this is just another button, and that button has text on it, and we're going to replace that text here in the level controller. So let's look at that script. So here's where my static variables are. So I've got one called key code. This is basically our combination, and we're defining it as 1331 at the moment, but we can have any combination we want. We have an input code, so this is what we're going to type in, and at the moment it's empty. So we could start with 0000, but if we did that, then when we added more to it, they would just be deleted anyway, and you'll see why in a second. So we start with that, as that's going to be empty. And then our code length, so the input code, so we're starting with 0, so we haven't typed any numbers or any letter, or haven't put any input in. So every time we type in a letter, sorry, not a letter, type in a number by clicking on it, the code length has 1 added to it. Now, oh, that's not the one, this one. So now down here we're saying update, and then we've got a public static, which is the text field. So we're going update, so make the text in the display the input code. So as we click on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on these buttons, the name of the button is the input code, and then that input code becomes the text field. So we can see as we type what we're typing. And then this is quite a simple little thing. We're saying when we've got 4 in, so I'm going to see the number 1, the number 3, another number 3. I'll see them display. And when I type in the 4th character, or when I click on the 4th button, then look at the rest of this. So only do that when I've got 4. So it's not comparing my input on my code until I've got the 4th digit in, or I've clicked the 4th button. So now we're just comparing what have I clicked on compared to my combination. Are they the same? And if they are the same, I'm saying I'm correct. Now obviously I can replace that with, you know, change level, or you know, open the door, send a message to open a door, or I can, you know, have any action I want consequential on getting the code correct. And then I've got an else to basically go, if I get it incorrect, if these things are not the same, so if I've put in the wrong 4 numbers, what happens? Well, the code length is reset to 0, so I can start again. The input code is reset to 0, so I can start again. And then the debug logger says incorrect. So again, this could be another action. We could say maybe set up a glowing red light to indicate failure, or we could have a door close if we got the key code wrong. So that's and they're the only 2 scripts that we use to make this work. So let's just play it one more time so you can see it in action. So I should probably turn that interactive off, the interactive setting for that button. Anyway, so I can place my my reticule over any button I want, so I can go 6, 3, 9, 6. And you can see down here in the bottom left hand corner it says incorrect, and my field has been reset to 0. I can get it wrong a second time or a third time, but when I get it right, 1, 3, 3, 1, you can see in the debug it says correct. So just in terms of doing puzzles, this is one sort of method that we can use in VIOR once we have our Bluetooth controller to aid us with input. Okay, so we'll leave it there for now, and hopefully you'll find a use for this in your projects.